Okay, here we are struggling with mainstream philosophy of language, and I'm busy explaining to you the views of a whole lot of people that I think are hopelessly mistaken. However, there are a whole lot of them, and there's only one of me, so I think somehow I outnumber them. But anyway, it takes more argument than I've given you, and now I want to give you some more arguments. But first I have to mount the arguments against my approach as powerfully as I can. Now, what are these two different approaches? Well, the question is, how do words relate to reality? And my answer is, because of certain mental capacities that human beings have, they can use words to relate to reality. They can use names to stand for things. They can use indexical expressions to refer indexically. They can use whole sentences to perform speech acts. So you have to tie it to the intentional capacities of the speaker. Now, the guys on the other side, I don't think have a very clear conception, but it's something like this. If you try to do it the way that I try to do it, it doesn't work because you get cases where all of the mental capacities are in order, but all the same, it doesn't connect. The words don't connect to reality in the right way. And probably the single most famous argument of this kind is the twin Earth argument. You have exactly the same thing in the heads of the people on Earth and the people on twin Earth, but they mean something different. So the mental capacities are never going to be enough because two people can have exactly the same mental capacities and mean something different. So what makes the difference? Well, the answer is that there's some causal connection to the outside world. And that's what really enables words to refer. Now, a good test case of this is the theory of proper names. Because on the Frege-Russell account of proper names, the name is really short for a definite description. And that seems kind of fishy because whenever you give the definite description, well, that's not going to be enough. It might turn out that that description is false. I mean, I might say, well, Aristotle's the guy who wrote the metaphysics, but maybe Aristotle didn't write the metaphysics. All the same, I'm still referring to Aristotle when I say Aristotle. And furthermore, different people might associate different definite descriptions. So when I was a kid, really literally, when I was an undergraduate, I thought, well, maybe the way out of that is to think of the name not as associated with a single definite description, but with a whole bunch of capacities. And this became known as the cluster theory. There's a cluster theory, the cluster of definite descriptions, and that's what enables you to refer. And then it couldn't turn out that the whole cluster was false. It couldn't turn out, for example, that, well, Aristotle was really the name of a bar stool in Hoboken in 1957, or Aristotle is really the name of a prime number. There's got to be something that's right about your conception of Aristotle. Okay, now this view, the description theory, as it's called, or the cluster theory, which is a special case, the description theory, was attacked by Kripke in the stuff that you're reading, and it was originally in lectures called Naming and Necessity. And Kripke argues that this kind of view cannot be right, because a guy might succeed in referring even if everything he believes about the referent is false. And he gives the following example. There's a famous, or was a famous logician in Princeton, Kurt Gödel. And suppose that the only thing that somebody knows about Gödel is that he proved Girdles Theorem. Gödel is famous for Girdles Theorem. Gödel is spelled this way with an umlaut over the O, and it's pronounced Gödel. That umlaut is no mystery. It's just the Germans got tired of writing the E all the time. So to make it short, they just save time and write two dots over the O. You know, there's no mystery. Same with the umlaut over the A. It's just short for an E. Anyway, okay, suppose there's a guy, and all he knows about Kurt Gödel is that Gödel proved Girdles Theorem, which proves the incompleteness of arithmetic. I never understood Girdles Theorem. In fact, there's more than one theorem, but it is a nice gem, and I sort of came to understand Girdles' second theorem. And I had to write an article for the New York Review of Books where an author named Penrose uses Girdles' theorem to prove that we're not computers because, according to Penrose, it's a terrible argument, but here's how it goes. We can understand Girdles' theorem, but computers can't. Therefore, we're not computers. Well, most of us can't understand Girdles' theorem, but I thought I'd test the New York Review and I'd give a summary of Girdles' second theorem and see if these bastards would publish it. You know, that's it. It's not bad. It's a newspaper that comes out on newsprint and used to wrap fish with it every second week. Are they actually going to publish Girdles' theorem? Well, they did. They accepted the challenge. Their Searle's summary of Girdles' theorem is in the New York Review, and it's actually published in that collection of articles called The Mystery of Consciousness. If you want to see my summary of Penrose's summary of Girdles' second theorem, you can read it in the New York in this collection. Anyway, suppose there's a guy, all he knows about Gödel is that he proved the incompleteness of arithmetic. But suppose, says Kripke, it's false. Suppose, in fact, the incompleteness of arithmetic was proved by a guy named Schmidt, and Gödel stole the proof from Schmidt and published it under his own name. Then, says Kripke, when I use Gödel to refer to Kurt Gödel, I use the name to refer to the guy, and somebody asks me, who do you mean? Anything I say will be false. I will say, well, I mean the guy who proved the incompleteness of arithmetic, and that's all I know about Gödel. But, says Kripke, all the same, I'm still referring to that guy when I say Gödel, even if the cluster of descriptions is entirely false. So what's the correct answer, according to Kripke? The correct answer is that the thing that enables me to refer with a proper name is there's a causal chain that stretches back to the guy. And there's an initial baptism. Let's call this kid Kurt Gödel. And then the baptism is passed from hand to hand. Different people then use the name. And as long as they use the name with the same intention, that is, they intend to refer to the same person as the person from whom they got the name, then the reference will succeed. They will succeed in referring to Kurt Gödel. So, as opposed to the description theory of names, there is a causal theory of names. And that's one argument for the causal theory is the descriptions might be false. Now, there's a related argument, a modal argument, also advanced by Kripke, that goes as follows. If you look at proper names in general are rigid designators. And a rigid designator is an expression that refers to the same object in all counterfactual situations. Now let's think about that. We know for a fact that Benjamin Franklin invented daylight saving time. And Benjamin Franklin was prodigious because he invented all kinds of practical things that are obvious once you think about them. Rocking chairs, daylight saving time, the Franklin stove, so not all the heat goes up the chimney, and a whole lot of other things like that. Okay. Now, we can imagine a possible world in which Benjamin Franklin does not invent daylight saving time. Somebody else invents it. Thomas Jefferson invents it. All right, but so the inventor of daylight saving time, that can refer to different people in different possible situations, or as philosophers like to say, in different possible worlds or in different counterfactual situations. So we can say the inventor of daylight saving time might have been somebody else. But we can't say Benjamin Franklin might have been somebody else. Somebody else might be Benjamin Franklin, because Benjamin Franklin is necessarily always the same guy. Now, that's the definition of a rigid designator. A rigid designator is an expression that always refers to the same object in different counterfactual situations. Another way to put that would be to say the rigid designator picks out the object by its essence, by its essential features, by whatever it is that makes it that very object, and consequently it always refers to the same object. It makes sense to say the inventor of bifocals, well, I was talking about daylight saving time. Benjamin Franklin also invented bifocals. That the inventor of daylight saving time might have been somebody else, but doesn't make sense to say Benjamin Franklin might have been somebody else. Benjamin Franklin is necessarily Benjamin Franklin, but the actual guy who invented daylight saving time need not have been the guy who invented daylight saving time. It might have been somebody else. And to say that is to say the definite description, the inventor of daylight saving time, is not a rigid designator, but proper names are rigid designators. Okay, so we got two arguments against descriptivist accounts of names. One is the descriptions might all turn out to be false, and you still succeed in referring. You'd still be referring to Girdle, even if everything you believed was false. And secondly, it can't be the case that proper names are equivalent to definite descriptions, because proper names are rigid designators, and except for a few oddball cases, definite descriptions are not rigid designators, because the same definite description will pick out different objects in different counterfactual situations. Okay, so on this account then, what's the right way to see proper names? Proper names on this view carry no descriptive content. As Ruth Marcus says, the proper name is like a label that you stick on an object. What fact enables the proper name to refer is just the fact that there is a causal chain connecting your utterance of the proper name to an original baptism. So the word gets handed down from a speaker to hearer, and from the hearer, who then becomes a speaker, and then pass it on to the next hearer, who then becomes the next speaker. There's this causal chain. And one way to put this debate is to say, according to those guys, I hold the dossier theory of proper names. You want to know who you mean by Socrates? You go in the file and you look up Socrates, and it says, teacher of Plato, killed by the Athenians by being forced to drink hemlock, invented the Socratic method. That's the dossier. And I make fun of them by saying they hold the chain tied to the ankle theory. What fact enables you to refer to Socrates? Well, when you say Socrates, you give a yank on this chain, and the chain passes back through time, back through millennia, and it's tied to the ankle of this poor guy in Athens, and he gets a big yank when you pull the chain, because that's how you're picking up Socrates. Okay. I think the whole discussion is vastly misconceived, but I haven't told you yet how it is. One hint is this. Everybody takes objects for granted. Everybody assumes we have a prior inventory of objects, and then the question is, how is it that we hit one object with a name and not some other object? And then there are endless puzzles about, my God, suppose there's no object there. There is no king of France. So you've got non-existent objects. And I want to say that's the really deep philosophical question. What is an object? And I have to get to that. Okay, but now then, we can see this in a broader perspective by saying there was, from the time of Freya, and really going back before Freya, a certain conception of linguistic capacities that said knowing the meaning of the word, or knowing how to use the word, or having the capacity to use the word, is being in a certain psychological state. You have a certain mental capacity. In my jargon, you have a certain intentional capacity. Now, this view is supposed to have been refuted. And looking through the literature, I count 5 different refutations, and I want now to summarize those for you, because I think without exception they're all mistaken, and fairly spectacularly so. But anyway, let's go through them. All right, the first and the most famous is our old friend, the twin earth. And I want to I went through that argument very briefly, but it is a famous argument. There's a recent volume called the Twin Earth Chronicles, which has a series of articles, including one by me, about the Twin Earth argument. Here's how it goes. It cannot be the case that knowing the meaning of a word, a general term or proper name, consists in being in a certain psychological state, because it's possible that two different people could be in exactly the same psychological state, even though they meant something different. And the simplest proof of this is the thought experiment of the twin Earth. Imagine, I'll just remind you how it goes. Imagine that in a very distant galaxy outside our light cone, there is a solar system exactly like our solar system. As philosophers love to say, molecule for molecule type identical with our solar system. And in that solar system, there is a twin of our Earth. We'll call it Twin Earth. And on Twin Earth, there's a twin Berkeley. And in Twin Berkeley, there is a twin of each of us, a doppelganger for each of us. And at this very instant on Twin Earth, give or take the speed of light, the doppelganger is discussing, each of our doppelgangers is discussing the Twin Earth argument in philosophy. Okay, now here's how it goes. If you go back to 1750, then take the general term water, what was in the heads of the people on Twin Earth was exactly the same was what was in our heads, because they had the same sort of experiences. But unknown to anybody in 1750, the chemical composition of what we call water on Earth was H2O, but the chemical composition of what they call water on Earth, though it tasted the same and looked the same, the chemical composition of the stuff that they call water was a very long, complex formula, and we'll just abbreviate it as X, Y, Z. So Twin Earth water is XYZ, and Earth water is H2O. Now, Putnam's argument, and this is the heart of the argument, what's in the heads of the people on Earth is identical with what's in the heads of the people on Twin Earth, because nobody knows this stuff about the chemical composition. In 1750, it was only discovered later. What's in the heads is exactly the same. We've postulated that it's exactly the same, but all the same, they mean something different, because what we mean on Earth, even if we don't know it, is H2O, and what they mean on Twin Earth, even if they don't know it, is XYZ. So as Putnam says, meanings just ain't in the head, and that's supposed to be a decisive refutation of the of internalism. This view, the view that is under attack, is called internalism because it says the semantic abilities involved in using language are mental capacities that are inside the head. They're all internal to the head. And the view that opposes them, not surprisingly, is called externalism. Okay, now what's true of water, says Putnam, is going to be true of pretty much all general terms, and indeed it's generally true of language, that what is in the head is insufficient for meaning. Why? We want meaning to be able to explain. We want the notion of meaning to be able to explain the relation between language and reality. But what's in the head is insufficient to explain the relation of language and reality, because what's in the head on Earth and what is in the head on Twin Earth is exactly the same, but the reality referred to is different. Does everybody see that? I mean, it's a powerful argument. It's worth taking seriously. And what's true of water is supposed to be across the board. Meanings are not in the head. Well, what is it then that fixes reference? What, if not in the head, what is meaning? And it turns out, says Putnam, meaning is a causal relation between objects and types of objects in the world and what's in our heads. And what fact makes it the case that when I say water, I refer to water, is that there's a fact that there's a causal chain connecting the initial baptism of the word back a long time ago, connecting it to me and connecting it with this kind of stuff that I'm about to drink a sip of. It's H2O and not XYZ. Okay, that's the argument, and you'll see it's a lot like Kripke's argument. Kripke's argument says that for proper names there has to be a causal chain connecting the occurrence of the word to the initial baptism, and Putnam says for general terms there has to be a causal chain. Okay, I saw some hands up, first you and then you. Yeah. 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 Well, there are, in different dialects of English, words that mean something different in the two different dialects. That's an important point, but it's not the same point as this one. The point as this one is you can have the same word, and it has the same associated concept in the head. It has the same mental thing in your head. But all the same, it means something different in the heads of two different speakers. You, then you, yeah. Yeah, all right. No, Putnam has to make an exception. What he says is molecule for molecule identical, except what we call water is H2O on Earth, and what they call water is XYZ on twin Earth. Now, I think, in fact, if we give up water, we give up everything. I mean, almost everything, because we're 90% water. So it means I don't know if they're really people on Earth if they have no water in their composition. But furthermore, it looks like you're going to have to say their beer isn't beer, and their ice cream isn't ice cream. You see, where beer is concerned, we actually live on twin Earth, because beer is defined by the German Reinheitsgebot, by the German purity law, as made with barley, malt, hops, and water. Well, you can go to St. Louis. In fact, you don't even have to go to St. Louis. You can buy this St. Louis junk right here in Berkeley. It's not, I mean, from the twin Earth, from the Putnam point of view, it's not real beer. It's XYZ beer. All right, I don't want to. Don't get me. I feel strongly about beer, but if you give up water, you're going to have to give up an awful lot. But I don't think Putnam's argument depends on that. I think that's just an illustration, and what he's trying to say. He has another argument about aluminum and molybdenum, and he has another argument that I'll tell you about. He agrees it's kind of science fiction-y to talk about twin Earths. So let's talk about Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is where he lives. In Cambridge, there are a lot of big deciduous trees. Now, he doesn't know how to identify all these trees. Some of them are beeches and some of them are elms. But all the same, beech doesn't mean the same as elm in his head, because beeches are not elms and elms are not beeches. But the picture he has in his head is exactly the same. It's a great big deciduous tree that lives in Cambridge and throws off its leaves in the fall when they turn a nice color, and then it grows them back in the spring. That's about all he knows. So his concept of beech is the same as his concept of beech, but it means something different. So meanings, even in this simple case, are not in the head, because what's in the head is the same for beech and elm, and yet the two words mean something different. So once again, meanings ain't in the head, and you don't have to have this. The whole point about twin Earth is it's just a colorful example. It's a colorful way of illustrating the difference. Now, so you're next. Yeah. A what case? A similar case, assuming case. We're assuming the possibility that there might be a solar system like ours in a distant galaxy. Now, this is the kind of thought experiment that philosophers like, and it annoys people in other disciplines because they think, well, hell, there isn't going to be such a place. Well, of course not. Nobody thinks there actually is such a place any more than they think you could actually answer questions in Chinese just by going through a computer program. The point about the thought experiment is, what if? What if there was such a place that was just like Earth, and on this Earth, on this twin Earth, they had the same thing in their heads, but they meant something different. Incidentally, it's an interesting question. How many solar systems in the universe are likely to have conscious life forms like ours? And I think it's probably a pretty big number. I asked some heavy-duty guy who specialized in this, how many planets in the universe have life like ours? And he said 10 to the 6th. That's the kind of fakey technical vocabulary that scientists are taught to use. 10 to the 6th just means a million. It's no more scientific. But anyway, than saying a million. But in any case, there are probably lots of places that have consciousness, and it'd be fun to know what their life is like. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, well, I don't know if it's called reality, but there certainly exists something called water, right? I mean, water is not, so to speak, up for grabs. Now, there are all kinds of things that are in doubt. There's even doubt about neutrinos. But where water is concerned, I got it. I mean, it's not, its existence is not in dispute. Okay, other questions at this point. The point is not an epistemic question. Well, how do you know there really is water? We're assuming we know that. The question is, what fact about my utterance of this word makes it refer to water and not something else? Putnam's answer is, what's in your head is not sufficient, because what's in the head of two different people could be exactly the same, and yet the meaning is different, the reference is different. And in Putnam's own case, the meaning of beech and the meaning of elm cannot be in his head because he has the same thing in his head, and yet they refer to two different kinds of trees. Putnam took meaning away from us. It gets worse because we're going to go to Burge, and he's going to take mental states like belief away from us. I'll tell you those in a minute. Yeah. 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 No. This is a very good question, and let me illustrate it. Now, here's the question. We think of Ben Franklin as a guy who did all these things, but of course, all kinds of other things, terrible things might have happened. He might have gotten kicked in the head by a horse when he was 3 years old and never grow up to be such a smart guy who did all this stuff. Yes, all the same, that would still be Benjamin Franklin. This is Kripke's point. It's a good point. That even if we didn't have the apparatus to refer to Benjamin Franklin, we would never be able to refer to him because he never became famous. All the same, in this hypothetical world, in this possible world, there still would have been a guy, and that very guy would have been Ben, even though he wouldn't have been famous as Benjamin Franklin. Incidentally, Franklin was incredibly famous in his lifetime, and when he went to Paris, he was a huge hit. Everybody wanted to have Franklin at their parties, and that's when he invented daylight saving time, because he noticed that all these people stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning every night, and then they slept during most of the daylight hours, or at least they slept till about lunchtime. And he thought, well, why not move the clock a bit so you get more daylight and you get to sleep more in the dark? It's an obvious trick, and it's a kind of thing that somebody explain it to you and think, well, that'll never work. Nobody's going to be fooled by that. Oh, yes, they are. We are, all of us, fooled by it, and we continue to follow Uncle Ben's procedures. In a couple of weeks, we will do the fall back, having done the spring forward. Okay, somebody else had a hand up. Yeah. Yeah. How does that prove it's still not in our head? Okay. Here is the proof. Now, let me state it very clearly. I'm embarrassed to be defending views I think are false, but anyway, let me defend them. You know, that's what you get paid to do that in philosophy, so why not? It can't be the case that meanings are in the head. Why not? Well, what do you need the notion of meaning to do in the first place? Meanings have to explain the relation between words and reality. That's what the meaning of the word does. It enables it to connect to the world. Okay, now the meaning that explains that relation can't be in your head, and this is the decisive point, because what is in the head of the people on Earth and what's in the head of the people on Twin Earth is exactly the same. It's exactly the same. We postulate it's the same. That's what we meant when we said it's molecule for molecule identical. They have brains just like ours. But the meanings can't be the same because they refer to two different things. Their word water refers to XYZ. Our word water refers to H2O. Everybody got that? I want everybody to get that much of the argument. And the argument about beeches and elms is really the same argument. It just says what's in my very own head might be the same for two different words. For the word beech and the word elm, all I know is it's some big deciduous tree, grows in Cambridge and other places up and down the East Coast. But all the same, the meaning is different because beeches are not elms and elms are not beeches, because XYZ isn't H2O and H2O isn't XYZ. By the way, it's an odd fact about California that if you learn half a dozen different names of trees, you can identify all the local trees. There just aren't very many. They brought in these dreadful eucalyptus from Australia and they throw their crap all over everything. But the native California trees is a very small list. Whereas when you get to Vermont, well, you can't learn the names of all those different kind of trees. I mean, there must be 70 different species. So anyway, it's an easier, California is an easier environment to cope with because you have very few. You know, you have the difference between the coastal redwood and the sequoias and things like that. But essentially, there are not a very large number of domestic species of trees, whereas in the eastern part of the United States, it's a prodigious range that you have. Okay, that's an irrelevant footnote. Any other questions before we go on? Yeah, one more question, then we're going to go on. It gets worse, because Putnam took meanings away from us. Burge is going to take beliefs out of our head. Watch what happens. Yes. Sorry? Yeah. What Putnam would say is that in 1750, they were using the same word as us, water, to refer to something that we wouldn't have been able to distinguish from the stuff we refer to with water. But unknown to them and unknown to us, we meant something different. Because we meant H2O, we had to find that out, and they meant XYZ. Now Putnam, not Putnam, rather Kripke took this same argument and ran with it. Kripke says water is a rigid designator too. It always refers to the same thing. So when we discovered that water was H2O, we made an a posteriori discovery. You know, you had to do this investigation. Somebody had to find this out by investigating. But what we discovered was a necessary truth. Because since both H2O and water are rigid designators, then if you have a rigid designator on both sides of the identity statement, it must be necessary because it refers to the same thing in all possible worlds. So, says Kripke, we had a scientific discovery of a logical truth, or rather of a metaphysical truth, as he calls it rather grandly. Again, I shudder when I tell you all this because I think it's mistaken, but it is widely accepted, and you ought to understand that because I'll come back to that point later. Okay, I'm going to take one more question about this, and then we're going to start wrestling with Burge. Yes? Yes. Yeah. 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 Well, I haven't told you what I think yet. I'm going to tell you what these other guys think, and I have to tell you, they're smart guys. I mean, they're good friends of mine, and we've been arguing about this like for the past 20 years or so, and that kind of discourages you about the prospects of progress in philosophy. But Putnam's Argument and Burgess, I think, have prevailed. That is, in the sense that most philosophers accept them. Now, there are all this other stuff about the role of the body and so on, and that's sort of really for cognitive science, for philosophy. But the question here, the question we're dealing with is, how do words relate to reality? And Putnam's point is, you cannot answer that question just by appealing to what's in the head. You can state Putnam's point without using the word meaning. I think it's convenient to use the word meaning, but what's in the head can't be sufficient to explain the relation between words and reality, because what's in the head can be the same, and yet the reality that it relates to is different. That was Putnam's point. Let me go on and give you Burgess' argument. Now, Burge imagines the following. Imagine that there is a guy who lives in Santa Monica. Burge teaches at UCLA. There's a guy in Santa Monica who likes to go jogging. And this guy develops a pain in his thigh. And he goes to his doctor. And he says, "Doctor, I think I've got arthritis. I've got a pain in my thigh, and I think it's arthritis. I believe I have arthritis." He says that. Okay, now the doctor, being a well-trained doctor, says, if it is in your thigh, it cannot be arthritis, because arthritis is an inflammation of the joints. Okay, everybody's got that picture. Now, we imagine the very same guy, only this time he's in a different community with different linguistic practices. He's not in Santa Monica. He's in twin Santa Monica. And he goes to his doctor, and he says exactly the same words. "Doctor, I have a pain in my thigh from too much jogging. I believe it's arthritis. I believe I have arthritis in my thigh." So now that is exactly the same both on Earth and twin Earth. He gets to the point where he says, "I believe I have arthritis in my thigh." But the two communities are different. And in twin Santa Monica, where they use the word arthritis differently, the doctor says, yes, well, it quite possibly is arthritis, because we've been getting a lot of arthritic muscle pains here in twin Santa Monica. It's very common nowadays. Okay, now watch what goes on in this case. The community in the two cases uses the word differently. What's in the guy's head in the real Santa Monica and what's in his head in twin Santa Monica is exactly the same, because it's the same guy. We don't even have to postulate a different guy on twin Earth. It's the same guy. It's just that the word is used differently. In the real Santa Monica, arthritis refers to an inflammation of the joints. And in twin Santa Monica, arthritis can refer to either a muscle pain or a joint pain. Okay, everybody's got the example. Now, says Burge, what this shows, though, is that the beliefs must be different. The belief in real Santa Monica is the belief that I have arthritis, and that's a false belief. But the belief in twin Santa Monica is a true belief. That guy really believes something true. He uses the word arthritis, and we can't use that because we have a definite meaning, so we'll introduce a new word. We'll say tharthritis. And in twin Santa Monica, the guy believes he has tharthritis, and that is a true belief. He truly believes that he has tharthritis. But in real Santa Monica, he falsely believes that he has arthritis. But now notice, what's in the head is exactly the same, because it's the same guy. It's exactly the same guy in the same situation. It's just he's in a different context. So, says Burge, beliefs aren't in the head either. What you believe is up to the community to decide. It's not just up to you, but it's up to you and your relation to the community. And the community decides in Twin Santa Monica that what you have in the head is a true belief. You truly believe that you have arthritis. And what you believe in real Santa Monica is a false belief. You falsely believe you have arthritis. But, and this is the key point, it can't be the same belief, even though what's in the head is the same. And the reason it can't be the same belief is that the same belief can be both true and false. And one belief is false, your belief that you have arthritis, and the other belief's true, the belief that you have arthritis, which you put by saying, I have arthritis. Okay, so everybody got the argument. So now the situation is getting worse. Putnam took meanings away from us and took them out of our head. Burge is taking beliefs away from us and taking them outside of our head. All right, I saw a whole lot of hands up. Now I want you to get this. Now I want you to see the pattern that's emerging. The pattern that's emerging is the conception of semantics, which is traditional and which Freya made systematic, is having a certain semantic ability is being in a certain psychological state. Now remember, Freya thought, well, you had to have this third realm. All the same, you have to internalize the elements in the third realm. You have to internalize the senses of words in order to understand their meanings. And what Burge and Kripke and Putnam are telling us is that can't be right, because what's in the head is insufficient to determine meaning, because what's in the head might be the same and the meaning is different. And the proof is that the relation to reality is different. Okay, I saw a whole lot of hands up. Let's start with her first, and then we'll take other people. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Now, I think something like this is the right answer. That the guy does have the same belief. He only has a belief. The only difference is that he also has a belief about how the word is used. And in our community, he believes falsely that arthritis is used to refer to muscle pains. And in the other community, he believes truly that that word is used to refer to muscle pains. I once explained this to a class, it may have been in this very room, and I thought this was a decisive answer to Burge. And they said, well, why don't you call him up and ask him? He's a friend of yours. Okay, so I'd call him up. Well, he was down at his beach place on sabbatical. The last thing he wanted to hear was some guy in Berkeley nagging him about arthritis. But anyway, I did have a long conversation with him, and he said, I'm going to stipulate that the guy has no metalinguistic beliefs. He's just an innocent user of language. He doesn't have any beliefs about the use of words. He just uses words. Now, that answer won't do, okay, for reasons that I have to explain to you later. I'm not going to answer all these now. But briefly, it won't do because a background assumption behind all of our uses of words is that we share them with other people. And as soon as you find out that the word that you're not using the word the way that other people use it, you'll change your usage. I'll give you a homely example of this. When I was a real little kid, I used to love new words. And I would use new words. I hadn't the faintest idea what they meant, but I'd use them because it was just so much fun to use these words. And once, in the presence of a girl that I knew, I was about 8, I guess, and she must have been about 11, I said in front of her parents, I believe Sally is pregnant. Now, I had no idea what that meant, but it seemed like a fun thing to say. And it created great consternation among the people present, not because they thought, well, maybe Sally is pregnant, but they thought, what a hell of a thing to say, and what could prompt you to say that? And what prompted me to say it was just simple ignorance on my part. Now, did I really believe that Sally was pregnant? No, of course I didn't believe that. I thought, well, you know, she's in some kind of condition, and maybe it's called pregnancy. Now, I think that that's like Burgess' case, where the guy believes he has arthritis. He doesn't really believe he has arthritis. He believes he's got something that is called arthritis, and that's a false belief. And in the other case, he believes that he's got something that is correctly called arthritis, and in the other case, it really is correctly called that. I'll come back to this later, because I think that's the correct answer. Yes? Well, you see, that's not quite right. It's a bit trickier, because, of course, all words we have to assume have meanings that we share with other members of our community. And if we discover that, as I discovered in the case of pregnancy, that the way that I was using the word doesn't match the way the community uses it, then I'll have to change my meanings. So Burgess' answer to me was, well, we're just assuming that the guy has no meta-linguistic beliefs, that he has no beliefs about the use of words. He never thought about what does the word arthritis means, he just uses it. Well, in a way that's okay, but you have to remember, even if he's never thought about it, he has a background presupposition behind all uses of language, namely that my use matches that of the community of which I'm a part. Okay, you're on, yeah. 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 Well, this is too heavy-duty theoretical for the discussion we're having. The question that we're asking is not about the evolution of meaning. I think that's an interesting question. As you know, I did try to answer it in an article, What is Language?, which is one of the assigned readings for the course. But the question we're answering now is the content of your head, what's between your ears, sufficient to do the job that we normally think meaning does? Is it sufficient to relate language to reality? And the answer given by Putnam is no. You can say that without using the word meaning. So the word meaning doesn't function essentially. And in Burgess' case, it goes further. Is what's in your head, is what's between your ears sufficient to determine what you believe? And Burgess says no, and he's got a proof. The proof is what's between your ears can be exactly the same in two different cases, but it's got to be a different belief, because one belief is true and the other is false. And the same belief cannot be both true and false. Guy at the back, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this relates to what she was saying, if I understand you correctly, and I think something like that is the correct answer to Burge, but it won't work for Putnam, because we do want to say in Putnam's case, or at least his intuition is, that the contents of their head were exactly the same on Earth and Twin Earth, and yet it seems they meant something different, because they used the word water to mean XYZ, and we use it to mean H2O. Okay, so now you've got two other refutations of internalism. You've got the Putnam account that says it has to be a causal relation between the use of the general term water and its initial baptism. And that's like Kripke's causal chain account connecting the occurrence of the word Socrates as used by you and the initial baptism of somebody as Socrates. What matters in both cases is that the contents of the brain, you can't even say the contents of the mind anymore, but the contents of the brain aren't sufficient to determine meaning, because the contents can be the same and the meaning be different. Now, when you get to Burge, you can't even, this is why you have to say the brain and not the mind, because if you think of beliefs as in the mind, well, what Burge is saying is that even what you believe isn't a matter of what's in your brain, what you've got, because it's up to the community that you're in to determine what you believe, and the proof is decisive. What's in your brain is exactly the same when you're in Santa Monica and Twin Santa Monica, but in both cases, in the two cases, you have a different belief, and the decisive proof is that the belief you have in Twin Santa Monica is a true belief, and the belief you have in real Santa Monica is a false belief. So it must be a different belief. Okay, so we now have a series of attacks on the Frege-Russell tradition, the tradition that includes, I guess, me and Strawson and Wittgenstein and a whole lot of other people. And let's just make a list of these attacks. Some of them I've spent a lot of time on, others not so much. Well, the first, you remember, was there's supposed to be a difference between de re beliefs and de dicto beliefs, between the de re and the de dicto. So if I have a de re belief, then the object itself has to figure as a constituent part of the belief. If I believe about that guy in the brown hat, he's a spy, then that is a de re belief, and I can't even have that belief if the guy doesn't exist. The belief itself contains the guy as a constituent part. Whereas if I have a de dicto belief, I just believe that the guy in the brown hat is a spy, well, then it looks like that would be subject to something like Russell's analysis in terms of the secondary occurrence of the definite description, because I just believe that a certain proposition is true. Whereas in the de re belief, I believe that the guy himself I have a belief that relates me to the guy himself and not just to a proposition. And that's why in some cases the de re belief is called a relational belief, because it relates you to the object itself. And Quine, I think, was the one who invented this distinction between the relational and the notional. Here you just have a notion. There's a guy in the brown hat that is a spy, and that is the totality. That all of that is inside the scope of your belief. Okay, now this is supposed to show that there are a class of beliefs that aren't in the head, the de re beliefs, because in the case of those beliefs, the object itself figures as a constituent part of the belief. I think this is a terrible argument, and I'm amazed that people got away with it. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, so I'll just refute it right now. There is a distinction between two different reports of a belief. I can say about Ralph. Remember, Ralph met a guy at the beach and thinks that guy's not a spy, and then he saw the same guy lurking around the Telegraph Avenue after midnight, and he thought that guy's a spy. Same guy. So under one description about the guy, he believes he is a spy, and under another description, he believes he's not a spy. Under the description, guy in the brown hat, he believes he is a spy. Under the description, guy met at the beach, he believes he's not a spy. Okay. Now, there's supposed to be two different kinds of belief, the de re and the de dicto. I want to say what the example shows is not that there are two different kinds of beliefs. There are two different ways of reporting a belief. It's not the belief itself, which can be de re or de dicto. It's the report, which can be a de re report or a de dicto report. What's the difference? The guy who's reporting Ralph's belief can decide how much of Ralph's belief he's going to commit himself to. So the reporter can say, look, there is this guy in a brown hat. Now, about that very guy, Ralph believes he's a spy. Okay, now there, the reporter commits himself to the existence of the guy. And then he reports, but does not commit himself to the truth of the rest of Ralph's belief. But the reporter needn't commit himself to all of that. The reporter can just say, look, Ralph believes that the guy in the brown hat is a spy. And that doesn't commit the reporter, the guy giving the report, to the existence of a guy in a brown hat. He could then add, but the whole thing was a hallucination. There never was a guy in the brown hat. It's just Ralph believed that there was. There is a distinction between two different ways of reporting a belief, but that's not a distinction between two different kinds of belief. Why not? There's a very simple proof. The distinction between the two different kinds of reports is not a distinction that Ralph can make. The person who has the belief can't distinguish between his de re beliefs and his de dicto beliefs because they're going to be the same belief in both cases. Ralph, we imagine, says to the person who believes this, the guy, let's suppose the guy says to Ralph, do you believe that the guy in the brown hat is a spy? Ralph could say, if this were a valid distinction, no, you asked me if I had a de dicto belief that the guy in the brown hat is a spy. I don't have a de dicto belief. I have a de re belief. About the guy in the brown hat, I believe he's a spy. I don't believe that the guy in the brown hat is a spy. That would be de dicto. I just believe the de re. About the guy in the brown hat, I believe he's a spy. And that makes no sense from Ralph's point of view. Why? Because it's the same belief, same conditions of satisfaction. In both cases, Ralph believes that there is a guy in the brown hat and that guy is a spy. Well, why is it that we, the reporters, can make a distinction Ralph can't make? Because we, the reporters, can decide how much of the belief we're going to commit ourselves to. And if in the de re report we commit ourselves to the existence of an object that Ralph's belief is about, and in the de dicto report we don't commit ourselves. But that's not a distinction that Ralph can make, because Ralph's committed to the whole damn belief. It's his belief. He can't say, about the guy in a brown hat, I hold no beliefs at all. I just hold the belief that the guy in the brown hat is a spy. That would be saying, I don't have any de re beliefs. I have only de dicto beliefs. That's not a distinction he can make, because it's his belief. He's committed to the whole thing. Now, there's another distinction between particular beliefs directed at specific objects and general beliefs. I might believe that dog over there in the corner has fleas, and that's a belief directed at a specific dog, and I might believe all dogs have fleas. But that's a different distinction. This is supposed to be a distinction not between particular and general, but between those beliefs where the object itself is a component part of the belief and those where it's not. On the account I'm giving you, there's no such distinction. All beliefs are de dicto beliefs. Sometimes in a report, we can give a de re report, and that means that we, the reporter, have a commitment, which we don't have if we just give a de dicto report. Okay, so that's one argument against internalism, and I'm amazed that it had as much influence as it did. I think it's fading out, but maybe not. Well, then there's another distinction, and that was the one we went over on Tuesday, and that's between referential and attributive. And there's supposed to be a distinction between the referential and the attributive use of definite descriptions. And so the story goes, the Strawson-Russell account of definite descriptions, the internalist account, cannot account for the referential use, because in the referential use, the guy can succeed in referring even if the description, and thus even if what's in his head, is not true of the object referred to. The guy can say, the man over there with champagne in his glass has had too much to drink, and I will succeed in referring to that guy even if it's not champagne, because I am using the definite description referentially. When I say in the courtroom case, the man who murdered Smith is insane, I'm referring to that very guy standing over there in the docket, even though the guy did not murder Smith, even though maybe nobody murdered Smith. That's the referential attributive. Okay, I attacked that last time, and I won't attack it again. It's in your reading at some length, my article, referential and attributive. But basically, the point is that in the referential uses, though the specific description that the guy gave might not be true of the object, if he's really referring, he has to fall back on some other identification. So he points over there to the guy and he says, the murder of Smith is insane. Suppose that guy didn't murder Smith. All the same, he was referring to that guy, and he could point to the very guy that he was referring to. Okay, I'll stop for questions in a few minutes, but I don't think these two are really very serious arguments against internalism, against the idea that being the master of a language is having a certain mental capacity in your brain. But now we get to the more serious one, and that is twin earth. And the twin earth argument in its various forms looks like it's going to refute any version of internalism. Because what the argument says, both in its specific form by Putnam and its general form by Burgess, is that the contents of the head are insufficient to determine reference, because two different people can have the same content in the head and yet refer to something different. That's the case of us on Earth and the people on twin Earth. And indeed, the very same person can have exactly the same thing in his head in two different communities, and yet he must have a different belief in those two different communities, because in one community his belief is false, and in another community, same guy. It's not, we don't have to imagine some twin earth guy. It's the very same guy. The very same guy in this other community holds a true belief. On Earth, in real Santa Monica, the guy holds a false belief. He falsely believes he has arthritis. But in twin Santa Monica, he truly believes that he has what he calls arthritis. We can't call it that because arthritis has a meaning for us, so we'll call it arthritis. He holds two different beliefs in these two different communities. He falsely believes that he has arthritis. He truly believes that he has arthritis. And Burgess has another example about beef brisket. I forget how it goes, but you can look it up. It'd be fun to look up Tyler Burgess on beef brisket. It's the same sort of argument. Okay, so we've got twin earth, and twin earth is going to take, we really got to answer that in some more detail, because it tells us something important about the use of language. I think Putnam has raised an important issue. And roughly speaking, the issue is that, well, the traditional notion of definition, going back to Aristotle, was that you gave a list of terms, and in Aristotle's case, you gave the genus and the species, or the species and the differentia. You made it more and more precise. So the definition of man is a rational animal. It's a terrible definition, but anyway, they got away with it for a long time. And the definition of water is it's a liquid, and it's clear, colorless, tasteless, and all the rest of us. And the idea that part of any definition is sort of a checklist of general terms, and that you understand the word when you got the right checklist. And I think Putnam does show that that's not right. But it doesn't follow from that that definitions aren't in the head, that meanings are not in the head. Okay, I'm going to come back to this. So this one, I'm anxious, I'll take questions about these two, but I don't think these are a serious threat. This is a serious threat. And then next one is rigid designators and the general problem of proper names and how we're going to deal with that. And the same works for Kripke for general terms, because, of course, water is a rigid designator as well. Water always refers to the same kind of thing, so it would, we could apply Kripke's notion to Putnam's argument. We could apply it and just say that what Putnam has shown is that the rigid designator water has to be identified in terms of some causal relationship, that its extension has to be identified in terms of some causal relation, because the checklist of general terms that you would give, that it's a clear, colorless, tasteless liquid, that is not adequate, because that's not a rigid designator. Different kinds of things might be clear, colorless, tasteless liquids. Okay, so let's stop for questions about those. We've got 4 different arguments against the internalism, and then I think we can add, as a 5th, we can add a Burge and the community. The idea in Burge's case is that the community gets to decide what you believe. It's not entirely up to you. Okay, questions about those. And 2 of those I think I've answered already, but the others I have to say more about twin earth, about Burge and arthritis, and about rigid designators. But questions now about this? Yeah.
I'm a little confused as to why this group of the belief makes a different belief, because it seems like when I believe it's raining,
Yeah.
I'm wrong, and when I believe it's raining, I'm right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but the point is that's because the circumstance that the belief refers to changes. So I hold the belief that it's raining. I look outside and see that it's not raining. It's a false belief. I hold the belief that it's raining. I look outside and see it's raining, that it's a true belief. But now, in the case of Burge, the facts are exactly the same. See, the facts about my pain, all those are exactly the same. So it's the same. The case you've imagined is 2 different situations. One is a situation where it's raining, and the other is a situation where it's not raining. But in Burge's case, it's exactly the same situation. I'm there in the doctor's office. I have exactly this feeling. And in the one case, I hold a true belief. I believe it's arthritis, as I say. And in the other case, I have a false belief. I believe it's arthritis. And the reason that it's a false belief in the second case is that this is the way we use the word arthritis. But the reason that it's a true belief in the other case is that they use the word arthritis differently. So, of course, the same belief can be false relative to one circumstance and true relative to a different circumstance. But in Burgess' case, the circumstance is the same. It's me in the doctor's office with a pain, or Bill, or whoever you want it to be. That's the reason it's got to be a different belief. Yes, you had a question. Yeah.
A few hundred years ago, if you were to say that we believe the Earth is flat,
Yeah.
how would you evaluate that?
Okay. At the time when we believed the Earth was flat, we were mistaken. It's an odd thing that people did believe this for a long time, because Aristotle was perfectly aware that the Earth was round. He figured it out. He looked at the horizon and calculated various things like the movement of the sun and the moon, and figured out the Earth has to be round. But a lot of people claim to believe that the Earth was flat, but that's just a false belief, because Earth always refers to Earth, and flat means flat. And so a lot of people for a long time held a false belief that the Earth is flat. Yes, Melissa. How does what?
How does making the predictor delay
Yeah. Here's how it's supposed to go. Melissa's question was, how does the de re de dicto distinction refute internalism? The idea is this. There are a class of beliefs, and along with beliefs, a whole lot of other things like desires and hopes and fears and statements, where the content of the belief cannot be entirely in the head, because in the case of a de re belief, the object itself that the belief is about is a constituent part of the belief. That's the idea. Well, in the case of the referential and attributive distinction, it's certainly related to that, because the idea there is that these that the Strawson Russell account of definite descriptions, though they think they're disagreeing, in fact, both of them neglected the existence of the referential use of the definite description. And this is a refutation of their internalist approach, because in the referential use, you succeed in referring even though the description you give, even though what's in your head is false of the object referred to. So there must be something outside your head that fixes the reference. Now, what Donnellan did in later writings was endorse the causal theory of reference and the causal theory of meaning, so, and of proper names. He says, well, what enables me to refer to Socrates, when I use the word Socrates, is that there is a historical account. There's a causal historical account that explains how my utterance of Socrates picks out that particular guy in history. However, you're right that it's not a direct attack on internalism in a way that Putnam's twin earth is supposed to be a direct attack. What Putnam is saying is that the contents of the head are insufficient to fix reference, because you can have the same contents in the head in two different cases, and the meaning and hence the reference is different in the two different cases. Now, I have to tell you that externalism is now standardly accepted. And the idea is that there are really two different kinds of mental contents. There's what's called narrow mental content, and that's in the stuff. That's the stuff that's actually in your head. And then there's wide mental content that includes facts in the world. I think this is hopelessly confused. I don't think there is such a thing as wide content, but in any case, we're going to get to that. I'll say more about that. Okay, other questions? Yeah, the guy at the very back, you're going to have to shout loud. Right. Right. No, that's the problem with these thought experiments is you can always vary the thought experiment. Suppose I get in my rocket carrying my glass of XYZ, I'm sorry, of H2O, and I get there, and how do we adjudicate the dispute? And they say, it's not really water, it's fool's water, like fool's gold. It's fake water. It's lousy earth water. Doesn't even taste as good as real, honest-to-John twin earth water, even though scientists can prove that the taste is exactly the same. I don't think it matters for this purpose. I mean, the problem with all these examples is the example gets out of hand. The point of the example was just to illustrate that you might have the same thing in the heads of two different people, but in the one case, the reference is to one type of object, and in another case, it's to another type of object. Actually, let's assume that Burge figures as part of twin earth, so we'll put Burge here. And then for our fifth one that I haven't got to, I mentioned it briefly last time, is indexicals. And the idea behind indexicals is that you can't give an internalist account of indexicals because there are essential indexicals that have different references where what's in the head is exactly the same. In the simplest kind of case, I say I am hungry, you say I am hungry, you utter those words. But the reference is different in the two cases, even though the meaning of the words is exactly the same. So the story goes, on an internalist account, you cannot deal with the problem of indexicals. Okay, well, look, we covered a lot of ground today. Now, I don't know if this is fun or not, but this is the center of the philosophy of language. So here's our project. Don't snap your notebooks yet. I want to talk to you about how we're going to proceed. I'm going to devote at least a lecture. Maybe I can even do it in less than a lecture, attacking all these views. I think that something like internalism has to be, right? Because we don't have any other resources besides what's in our heads for speaking. Now, sometimes we rely on other people. Of course, we're parts of a community, and it's up to the community to decide how they're going to use words like water or arthritis, or for that matter, pregnant. However they're going to use these words, it's up to the community, and if I discover that my use doesn't match, then unless I'm really pretty nasty about it, I will change my usage to match the usage of the community. But if you take the totality of the heads of the members of the community, then meanings have to be in the heads. And incidentally, linguistics would be impossible if meanings aren't in the heads, because what we're doing is investigating language, the linguistic capacity of human beings as part of their psychological repertoire, as part of their cognitive abilities. One of the staunchest opponents of internalism has always been Chomsky. Chomsky and I don't agree on very much, but we do agree on internalism, that if you're going to give an account of language, you have to appeal to it as a kind of cognitive capacity. Okay, so I'll try to finish with all that next time. Then we're going to go on and talk about truth, because you don't get your money's worth out of a course in the philosophy of language if you don't get a theory of truth. And I want you to start thinking about, what do you mean when you say something's true? And a view that everybody thinks has been refuted, but I'm not sure it has, is the correspondence theory of truth, that says a proposition is true only if it corresponds to a fact, or corresponds to how things really are in the world. Okay, then if we finish truth, then we'll go back and do the application of the theory of speech acts to things like metaphors and fiction and pictures and all that other stuff. So that's the project from now on. Okay, I'll see you next week.